The phone rang at 5:40 in the morning. I was already awake, watching the steam rise from my coffee cup in the kitchen my mother painted yellow 40 years ago. At 65, my body wakes before the sun does. The house was quiet in that holy way, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. When I saw Miriam's name on the screen, my chest tightened. My sister doesn't call at dawn unless something has broken. Helena. Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying for hours. Don't open the door today. Please, no matter who knocks, just promise me. I set down my cup. Miriam, what's... Promise me. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, feeling the weight of words she didn't say. My sister has always been the soft one, the one who believed in second chances long after they'd been spent. But this wasn't softness in her voice. This was fear. I walked to the front window and pulled back the curtain. The street was empty, the sky still gray with pre-dawn light. Nothing moved except Mrs. Costa's cat crossing the sidewalk. At 7:15, someone knocked. 2 men stood at my gate wearing navy shirts with a water company logo I didn't recognize. One carried a clipboard. The other held a folder thick with papers. I didn't open the door. I watched them through the curtain. The taller one pressed the doorbell 3 times, patient and methodical. Then he called out, "Dona Helena Maria dos Santos? We need you to sign some documents regarding the property." My full name, middle name included. Most strangers don't know my middle name. The water company certainly doesn't. I stayed silent, my hand pressed against the wall where my mother used to hang her rosary. The men waited 5 minutes, then left. But not before the shorter one wrote something in a small notebook and took a photo of my front door with his phone. When they disappeared around the corner, I picked up my own phone and took a photo of their license plate through the window. I've learned this over the years. When men come with papers and smiles, you document first and trust never. My coffee had gone cold. I poured it down the sink and made a fresh cup, my hands steadier than my heartbeat. Miriam's voice echoed in my head. Don't open the door. When he said my middle name, I knew this wasn't their first visit. By 9 a.m., I'd checked every lock twice. I'm not a fearful woman. I've lived alone in this house since my mother died 12 years ago, and I've never been afraid of my own silence. But today, the quiet felt different. It felt watched. I made toast I didn't eat. I watered the plants in the backyard. I folded the same dish towel 3 times. And I waited for Miriam to call back and explain what she'd started at dawn. At 10:20, the gate creaked. I moved to the window fast enough to see a young woman in a gray blazer walking up my front path. She carried a leather briefcase and wore heels that clicked against the concrete like a countdown. She knocked, soft, professional. Dona Helena? I'm from Santos and Almeida Realty. I believe you're expecting me regarding the property listing? Property listing. I pressed my back against the wall, my pulse loud in my ears. I'm not listing this house. I've never spoken to a realtor. This is the home my mother left me, not in a casual handshake, but in a handwritten will she made me witness while she was still strong enough to hold the pen. The woman knocked again. We have the signed authorization. I just need to confirm the details with you before we proceed with the buyer. Signed authorization. My phone buzzed. A text from Miriam. Until noon. Please, I'm trying to fix this. Fix what? I typed back. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, Paulo. Paulo. The name hit me like a slap I'd been expecting for 20 years. Paulo, Miriam's ex-husband. The man who drained her savings account to pay for a business that never existed. The man who borrowed money from her friends and disappeared for 6 months. The man she finally divorced 3 years ago after he showed up drunk at Christmas and told her children she was the reason he'd failed. Paulo, who once asked me for a loan and called me selfish when I said no. Paulo, who'd learned long ago that my sister's kindness was a door you could walk through again and again. The woman at my door waited another minute, then slipped something under the gate, a business card and a printed page. When she left, I opened the door just wide enough to retrieve the paper. It was a copy of a power of attorney, signed in my name, dated 6 weeks ago. granting Paulo Henrique Cardoso full authority to negotiate the sale of this property on my behalf. My hand shook holding it. I'd never signed this. I'd never even seen it. By the time the church bell rang 12, I understood why she was crying. Miriam arrived at 12:30, her face pale and swollen. She didn't knock. She used the key I gave her years ago, the one she's only used twice, once when I had the flu, once when my mother died. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the forged document spread in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. Helena, her voice cracked. I didn't know he would... Sit down. She sat. Her hands twisted in her lap like they were trying to hold something that kept slipping away. He told me he had a business opportunity, she said quietly. A buyer interested in a property near the market. He said it was an estate sale, something quick. He asked me to co-sign some paperwork so he could act as the broker. I thought... She stopped, her breath hitching. I thought it was legitimate. I didn't say anything. I let her sit with it. He used my computer, she continued. I didn't see what he printed, but last week I found your name in his files, and yesterday I saw this. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of a message. Closing at 3 p.m. Friday. Bring the notarized POA and the deed copy. Buyers paying cash. He forged your signature, Miriam whispered. He's selling your house. I looked at the paper again. The signature wasn't even close to mine. The loops were wrong, the slant off. But it was notarized, stamped, official looking enough to fool someone who didn't know me. Why didn't you call the police? I asked. Because he said if I did, he'd say I helped him, that I knew, that I gave him your information. Her voice broke. Helena, I'm so sorry. I thought I could stop him before he cashed in on my mother's house. She flinched. I stood and walked to the cabinet where I keep my documents. I pulled out the blue folder I've maintained since my mother got sick. Every receipt, every utility bill, every proof of ownership. At the bottom was my mother's will, handwritten on lined paper, witnessed by Father Martins and our neighbor, Donna Rosa. This house was never up for negotiation, I said. But he made my name a transaction. Miriam wiped her eyes. What are we going to do? I closed the folder and looked at her. We're going to the notary. My mother's house was never for sale, but my name was. The notary office smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. I'd been here 3 times before, once for my mother's will, once for a property deed update, and once to notarize my own living will. I knew the clerk, Lydia, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a reputation for catching mistakes. She looked up when we walked in, and her expression shifted when she saw my face. Donna Helena. She set down her pen. Is everything all right? I placed the forged power of attorney on her desk. No. Lydia picked up the document, her eyes scanning the page with the efficiency of someone who'd read thousands of legal papers. Her finger stopped at the notary stamp. When was this supposedly signed? She asked. 6 weeks ago, September 15th. She pulled out a magnifying glass and examined the stamp more closely. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a reference book, a catalog of official notary stamps by date and region. Miriam sat beside me, silent and pale. Lydia flipped through the pages, stopping at a section marked with yellow tabs. She compared the stamp on the forged document to the images in the book. Then she looked up. This stamp is from 2023, she said quietly. The seal design changed in January 2024. Whoever notarized this used an outdated stamp. My chest loosened for the first time since dawn. So, it's fake, Miriam whispered. It's fraudulent, Lydia corrected, which means it's legally void, but someone went to great effort to make it look real. She looked at me. Do you know who did this? My sister's ex-husband. Lydia's jaw tightened. And he's planning to use this to sell your property? Today, at 3 p.m. She checked her watch. It was 1:15. Then we don't have much time. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. I'm calling the notary supervisor. We'll need an official declaration that this document is fraudulent, and you'll need to file a police report immediately. While she spoke, I opened my blue folder and pulled out the real documents. My mother's will, the property deed in my name, 12 years of utility bills with my signature. Lydia glanced at the folder and nodded, a small smile crossing her face. You keep good records. At my age, I said. Memory isn't enough. She handed me a form. Fill this out. Every detail you can remember. Names, dates, times. If he sent messages, if there were witnesses, if anyone else approached you. I thought of the two men at dawn, the realtor at my gate, the license plate I'd photographed. I wrote it all down in careful, precise handwriting. The kind my mother taught me when I was 7 years old. The kind that doesn't lie. Miriam watched me write, her hands folded in her lap like a child in church. When I finished, Lydia reviewed the form and nodded. This is solid, she said. But you need to move fast. If he meets the buyer and exchanges money based on fraudulent documents, it becomes a bigger legal mess. What do I do? I asked. Stop him before 3 p.m. The stamp was 2 years too young for the lie it carried. We left the notary at 1:45 with two things: a signed declaration that the power of attorney was fraudulent and the name of the real estate office where Paolo planned to close the deal, Santos and Almeida Realty, the same company whose card had been slipped under my gate that morning. Miriam drove. I sat in the passenger seat with my blue folder on my lap and my phone recording everything, a habit I'd picked up from a lawyer on a TV show. Document first, trust never. What if he's already there? Miriam asked, her voice tight. Then we'll be there too. Helena, he won't just back down. You don't know how he gets when he's cornered. I looked at her. I watched our mother die in that house. I've buried friends, survived betrayals, and outlived expectations. Paolo doesn't scare me. She didn't answer, but her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. At 2:10, we pulled up outside the realty office, a modern building with glass doors and a receptionist smiling behind a curved desk. Miriam stayed in the car. I can't go in there. Then wait here, but don't leave. I walked in alone. The receptionist looked up. Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment? I'm here regarding the property sale scheduled for 3 p.m. Her smile faltered slightly. Are you the seller's representative? I'm the owner. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. I'm sorry, I don't have you listed. The appointment is with Senor Paolo Cardoso and the buyer. I know. I set my blue folder on her desk, and I'm here to cancel it. Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand. The power of attorney he's using is fraudulent. The stamp is outdated, the signature is forged, and the property isn't for sale. This is the notary declaration confirming that fact. I handed her Lydia's signed statement. The receptionist's eyes widened. She picked up the phone. Let me get the broker. A man in a gray suit appeared 2 minutes later, tall, polished, irritated. Donna Helena, I presume? Yes. I'm Ricardo Santos, the managing broker. I understand there's some confusion about the property listing. There's no confusion. The listing is a fraud. His expression hardened. Senor Cardoso provided all the necessary documentation. If you're disputing ownership, you'll need to resolve that with him directly. I'm not disputing ownership. I'm informing you that the documents he provided are fake. I opened my folder and spread the papers across his desk. The fraudulent power of attorney, the notary declaration, my mother's will, the property deed with my name. This is my house, has been for 12 years, and I never authorized anyone to sell it. Ricardo studied the papers, his jaw working. Then he picked up the phone again. Cancel the 3 p.m. appointment. But sir, the receptionist started, the buyer is already on his way. Cancel it. He hung up and looked at me. Senor Cardoso will be here in 10 minutes. I suggest you stay and address this matter with him directly. I intend to. I sat down in the waiting area, my folder on my lap, my phone recording in my pocket. At 2:35, the glass door opened. Paolo walked in wearing a pressed shirt and a smile that died the moment he saw me. He smiled at the gate, not knowing the camera saw him first. Paolo froze in the doorway, his briefcase hanging from one hand like dead weight. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two people who'd shared family dinners and Christmas mornings and a funeral, now standing on opposite sides of a crime. Helena. His voice was smooth, practiced. What a surprise. Not for me. Ricardo stepped forward. Senor Cardoso, there's been a complication. Donna Helena is disputing the authority you've presented. Paolo's smile tightened. There's been a misunderstanding. Helena, If you'd just let me explain. Explain how you forged my signature? The receptionist looked away. Ricardo crossed his arms. Paolo laughed, a short, hollow sound. This is ridiculous. Miriam helped me prepare those documents. She gave me your information. If there's been an error, it's a clerical mistake, nothing more. Miriam is in the car, I said quietly. Would you like me to bring her in? His face paled. I didn't think so. Ricardo cleared his throat. Señor Cardoso, I'm going to need you to provide additional verification. Donna Helena has presented evidence that the power of attorney may be… Maybe? I turned to Ricardo. The notary stamp is from 2023. The document is dated 2025. There's no maybe. Paolo set down his briefcase and moved closer. Helena, listen. You live in that house alone. It's too big for you. The neighborhood's changing. I found a buyer willing to pay fair market value. You'd have enough to buy a smaller place and have money left over. I was doing you a favor. By forging my name. By handling the details you'd rather not deal with. I stood. You're right about one thing. I don't deal in theft. I deal in proof. Paolo's expression shifted, something cold moving beneath the surface. You're going to regret this, he said softly. Miriam's involved whether she admits it or not. If you push this, I'll make sure everyone knows she helped me. Then everyone will know she's a victim too. His jaw clenched. Ricardo stepped between us. I think it's best if you both leave and resolve this through proper legal channels. The sale is canceled. Paolo looked at him, then at me. This isn't over. Yes, I said. It is. He walked out, his footsteps sharp against the tile. I collected my documents and thanked Ricardo. When I got back to the car, Miriam was crying. Quiet, steady tears that left no sound. He said you'd make it worse, she whispered. He said if I just stayed quiet, he'd fix it. I got in the passenger seat and closed the door. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be stopped. She asked me to forget. I told her memory is my only wealth. That evening, I received a letter. It came by courier, a young man who barely looked at me when I signed for the envelope. Inside was a formal notice from Paolo's lawyer claiming I'd obstructed a legal transaction and demanding I cease interfering with his client's business affairs. The letter was full of legal language I only half understood, but the threat was clear. Back down or face a lawsuit. I sat at my kitchen table and read it 3 times. Miriam called. Did you get it? Yes. Helena, I'm so sorry. He's doing this because I told him I'd testify if he didn't stop. Good. But his lawyer says, his lawyer is protecting a criminal. That's not the same as being right. She was quiet for a moment. Everyone's talking. Donna Rosa asked me if it's true you're selling the house. Paolo's been telling people you're confused, that you asked him to help, and now you're backing out. I closed my eyes. This was the part that always came. The moment when truth had to fight its way through whispers and rumors, where silence felt easier than standing. Let them talk, I said. But Helena, Miriam, I buried our mother in silence. I kept her house in silence. I've lived 65 years learning when to speak and when to wait. This time, I speak. She hung up without saying goodbye. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my gate. Judicial warning. Property dispute under review. Do not make alterations or transfers. Mrs. Costa saw it. So did the mailman. By noon, 3 neighbors had called to ask what was happening. I took the notice down and folded it carefully. Paolo was building a story, that I was the problem, that I was unstable, that I couldn't be trusted with my own home. I'd seen this before. How men rewrite history when women remember too clearly. But I've never been the kind of woman who forgets where she buried the truth. I opened my blue folder and added the lawyer's letter and the judicial notice to the growing collection. Then I called Lydia. I need copies of everything, I said. Notarized, time-stamped, certified. Are you filing a police report? Today. Good. Bring everything. And Helena? Yes? Don't let him scare you into silence. I looked at the papers spread across my table. 40 years of a life lived in one place, reduced to proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I wasn't lying. I'm not scared, I said. I'm documenting. They can evict a body, not a truth. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and bureaucracy. I arrived at 8 a.m. with my blue folder, Lydia's notary declaration, and a typed timeline of every event since Miriam's phone call at dawn. The officer at the desk, a young woman with tired eyes, listened to my story without interrupting. "Do you have proof of the forgery?" she asked. I handed her the documents. She reviewed them slowly, her pen moving as she made notes. When she reached the power of attorney, she paused. "This stamp is definitely wrong," she said. "But to file fraud charges, we'll need a statement from the notary who supposedly authenticated this. The notary office already confirmed it's fraudulent. Here's their declaration." She nodded, impressed. "You're very prepared. At my age, preparation is survival." She took my statement, filed the report, and gave me a case number. "This will take time," she warned. "These cases often do. If Señor Cardoso has a lawyer, expect pushback. I expect nothing less." As I left the station, my phone rang. "Lydia. Helena, can you come to the office? There's something you need to see." 20 minutes later, I was back at the notary, following Lydia into a small back room filled with filing cabinets and ledgers. She closed the door and pulled out a registry book, the official record of all notarizations performed in the office. "I checked the date Paolo supposedly notarized the power of attorney," she said, opening the book to September. "There's no entry for your name, no signature, no stamp, no record, which confirms it's fake. Yes, but there's more." She flipped to another page. 3 weeks before that date, there's a notation here. An inquiry was made about property transfer procedures. The person who asked, she tapped the name in the margin. "Paulo Enrique Cardoso." My pulse quickened. He was planning this. He was researching, and look at this. She pulled out a photocopy of a document request form. "He submitted a request for a copy of your property deed. I didn't process it. I was on vacation. But one of the temporary clerks did. He got my deed information from here?" "Illegally, yes. The clerk shouldn't have released it without your authorization. She's no longer with us." Lydia handed me the photocopy. In the corner, in small, careless handwriting, was a note. "Per PCO request. Expedited." "PCO?" I asked. "Paulo Cardoso's initials. He has a history here. Small things. Rushing paperwork, asking for shortcuts. I always refused. But this clerk didn't know him." She closed the book and looked at me. "This proves premeditation, Helena. He didn't forge this on impulse. He planned it weeks in advance." I took the photocopy and added it to my folder. "Can I have an official copy of that registry page?" "Already printed." She handed me a sealed envelope. "Signed, stamped, dated. Use it carefully." I thanked her and turned to leave, but she stopped me. "Helena, women like us, we're invisible until we're inconvenient. Then suddenly we're liars, or confused, or bitter. Don't let them write that story about you." "I won't. I'm writing my own." In the corner of the page, the lie blinked. That afternoon, I called Paolo. Not from anger, not from fear, from strategy. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone on speaker, recording every word, and dialed the number Miriam had saved in my contacts months ago. He answered on the third ring. "Helena." His voice was cautious. "I hope you're calling to be reasonable." "I'm calling because I have questions." A pause. "About what?" "About the power of attorney. How did you get my signature?" "You know how. Miriam helped me with the paperwork." "Miriam says she never signed anything with my name." "Miriam's memory isn't reliable." "Maybe. But the notary's records are, and according to their registry, that document was never notarized. The stamp is fake, Paolo. Outdated by 2 years." Silence. I let it stretch. That must be a clerical error," he said finally. "A clerical error that happens to benefit you. That's convenient." "Helena, listen. You're making this complicated. I was trying to help you. That house is falling apart. You can't maintain it alone." "I've maintained it for 12 years. You're 65. What happens when you're 70? 75? You should sell now while you can." "But I'm not selling, and you don't have the authority to sell for me." "Miriam gave me permission." "Miriam isn't the owner. I am, and I never authorized anything." His tone changed, harder. "You're going to regret this." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. You think you can embarrass me and walk away? I have lawyers. I have witnesses. I'll prove Miriam was involved, and you'll both— You were never supposed to find out. The words slipped out of him, smooth and certain. I stopped breathing. He realized his mistake a second too late. I know what you mean. You thought I'd never notice, that I'd sign whatever you put in front of me, or that Miriam would keep me quiet. You thought I was simple. I never said that. No, but you thought it. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I saved the recording, backed it up to 3 different places, and emailed a copy to Lydia and the police officer handling my case. Then I sat back and breathed. Simple doesn't mean blind, he said. You were never supposed to find out. I hit record before he finished. For the next 3 days, I didn't leave the house. Not from fear, from focus. I spread every document across my dining table. The forged power of attorney, Lydia's registry proof, my mother's will, the property deed, 12 years of utility bills, the police report, Paolo's threatening letter, and the recording of our phone call. I organized them chronologically. I labeled each page. I made copies and stored them in 3 separate locations, one in my bedroom, one in Miriam's house, one in a safety deposit box at the bank. I wrote a timeline on lined paper, the kind my mother used for grocery lists, and noted every detail: times, dates, names, contradictions. 5:40 a.m., Miriam's warning call. 7:15 a.m., 2 men at the gate. 12:30 p.m., forged document revealed. September 15th, date of supposed notarization, no registry record. 3 weeks prior, Paolo requested my property deed information. Every lie has a shape. You just have to outline it clearly enough that others can see. Miriam came by on the 2nd day. She looked thinner, her eyes shadowed. Have you heard from him? I asked. He's telling everyone I betrayed him, that I set him up. Good. Helena, people believe him. People believe stories that are easier than the truth. Let them. She watched me work for a while, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't drink. I should have left him years ago, she said quietly. You left him when you were ready. I should have been ready sooner. I looked up. Miriam, there's no should. There's only what happened and what we do now. She set down the cup. What are we doing now? We're finishing this. On the 3rd day, I received a call from Ricardo, the broker. Donna Helena, I thought you should know. Senor Cardoso attempted to reschedule the property sale with a different notary. I informed him that the listing has been permanently canceled and that we filed an internal report about the fraudulent documents. Thank you. I also wanted to apologize. We should have verified his authority more carefully before scheduling the sale. You trusted the paperwork. That's what he counted on. Still, I'm sorry. After we hung up, I added a note to my timeline. Attempted second sale after exposure. The storm wasn't outside, it was on paper. The meeting was set for Thursday at 2 p.m. at the notary office. Paolo's lawyer had demanded a mediation, a chance to resolve the misunderstanding before formal legal proceedings. Lydia offered the notary conference room as neutral ground. I arrived 15 minutes early with my blue folder and a calm I'd spent 3 days building. Miriam came with me. She sat in the waiting area, her hands folded, her face pale. You don't have to come in, I told her. Yes, I do. Paolo arrived at 2:05 with his lawyer, a man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit and an expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Lydia led us into the conference room. We sat across from each other, Paolo and his lawyer on one side, Miriam and me on the other. Lydia sat at the head of the table with a legal pad and a pen. Let's begin, she said. This is an informal mediation. Both parties have agreed to discuss the dispute regarding the property at Rua das Flores, 428. Paolo's lawyer spoke first. My client maintains that he was acting with proper authorization provided by Dona Miriam Santos, the property owner's sister. Any irregularities in the documentation were unintentional and can be corrected. Unintentional, I repeated. Yes. I opened my folder and pulled out the forged power of attorney. This document is dated September 15, 2025. The notary stamp is from 2023. That's not a paperwork error. That's fraud. The lawyer shifted. If there's a problem with the stamp, there's no if. Lydia confirmed it's fraudulent. There's no record of this document in the official registry. It was never notarized. Perhaps it was processed at a different office. It wasn't processed anywhere, because I never signed it. Paolo leaned forward. Helena, this is getting out of hand. I made a mistake, fine. But you're acting like I committed some crime. Forgery is a crime. Fraud is a crime. Attempted theft is a crime. His face hardened. I wasn't stealing. I was helping you sell a house you can't afford to keep. I never asked for your help. You wouldn't know how to ask. You barely leave that house. You're isolated, confused. I'm organized. There's a difference. I pulled out the next document, the registry page showing Paolo's inquiry 3 weeks before the forgery. You requested a copy of my property deed, without my permission. You researched transfer procedures. You planned this. His lawyer glanced at the page and his expression tightened. And then, I continued, pulling out my phone, when I confronted you, you said this. I played the recording. Paolo's voice filled the room. You were never supposed to find out. The lawyer closed his eyes. Paolo's face drained of color. Lydia made a note on her legal pad. I pulled out the final document, the police report. I filed formal fraud charges 2 days ago. The police have copies of everything. So does the real estate office. So does the notary supervisor. Your lawyer can argue about intent, but the evidence speaks clearly. The room was silent. Paolo's lawyer stood. I need to speak with my client privately. They stepped into the hallway. Miriam reached for my hand under the table. When they returned, Paolo wouldn't look at me. His lawyer spoke carefully. My client is willing to sign a formal retraction stating that he has no claim to the property and will not pursue any further action regarding its sale. And, Lydia prompted, and he will cover any legal costs Donna Helena has incurred. I looked at Paolo. That's not enough. He finally met my eyes. What do you want? I want you to understand something. You thought I was easy, simple, forgettable. You thought my sister's fear was permission. You thought my silence meant I wouldn't fight. I stood and gathered my documents. You were wrong. He froze, the color of a man who met the truth with no escape. The notary supervisor's office was larger than Lydia's, with certificates lining the walls and a mahogany desk that spoke of decades of official authority. Dr. Pereira was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of presence that made people sit up straighter. She'd requested this meeting after reviewing the evidence Lydia had submitted. Paolo and his lawyer sat on one side. Miriam and I sat on the other. Lydia stood by the door with a folder thick enough to tell its own story. Dr. Pereira opened the meeting without pleasantries. Senor Cardoso, I've reviewed the documentation regarding the alleged power of attorney for property at Rua das Flores, 428. The stamp used on this document is from 2023. Our office changed stamp designs in January 2024. This document could not have been notarized here in September 2025. Paolo's lawyer started to speak, but she raised a hand. Furthermore, there is no entry in our official registry for any transaction involving Donna Helena Maria dos Santos on that date. No signature, no witness, no fee recorded. She pulled out a document. What we do have is a record of you, Senor Cardoso, requesting property deed information 3 weeks prior without owner authorization. That was a misunderstanding, Paolo began. It was a breach of protocol that enabled fraud. Dr. Pereira's voice was cold. Our temporary clerk released confidential information inappropriately. She has been terminated, but you solicited that information knowing you had no legal right to it. She turned to me. Donna Helena, I want to formally apologize on behalf of this office. Your trust in our institution was violated, and measures have been taken to ensure this cannot happen again. I nodded. Thank you. Now, she looked at Paolo. The matter of consequences. This office is filing an official report with the public ministry. Forgery of notarial documents is a federal crime. Additionally, Donna Helena has every right to pursue civil damages. Paolo's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Pereira, my client is willing to settle this matter privately. This is no longer a private matter. When someone forges notarial documents, it undermines public trust in our entire system. I cannot and will not allow that to be resolved with a handshake and a retraction. She slid a document across the desk. This is a formal declaration of fraud. It will be entered into the National Notary Database. Any future transaction Señor Cardoso attempts will be flagged for additional verification. Paulo stared at the paper like it was a death sentence, because in a way, it was. His reputation, his ability to conduct business, his word, all of it tied to a document that would follow him for years. "You're destroying my career over a mistake," he said quietly. "No," I said. "You destroyed it yourself when you put my name on that paper." Dr. Pereira stood. "This meeting is concluded. Señor Cardoso, you'll receive a formal summons from the public ministry within 10 business days. I suggest you cooperate fully." Paulo and his lawyer left without another word. When the door closed, Dr. Pereira turned to me. "Women your age are often targeted for property fraud. They assume you won't notice, won't understand, won't fight. I'm glad you did all three." "I had good help," I said, glancing at Lydia. "You had good records," Dr. Pereira corrected. That made all the difference. Outside, Miriam and I stood in the afternoon sun. She was crying again, but this time it looked like relief. "Is it over?" she asked. "The legal part will take time." "But yes, the important part is over." She wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry I brought him into our lives." "You didn't know who he was." "I should have." "Miriam." I took her hand. "Some people spend their whole lives learning how to lie. You spent yours learning how to trust. That's not a weakness." She squeezed my hand. "What happens now?" "Now we go home." The stamp turned to dust, and so did his plan. 3 weeks later, I was watering my mother's roses when Miriam called. "Have you seen it?" "Seen what?" "Paulo's been arrested." I set down the watering can and sat on the back steps. "When?" "This morning. The public ministry charged him with document forgery, fraud, and identity theft. His lawyer couldn't get bail reduced. The judge called him a flight risk." I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. "Helena, I'm here. Are you okay?" I'm thinking about how many years he spent convincing people he was honest, and how one folder full of receipts proved he wasn't. Miriam was quiet for a moment. "Donna Rosa told me something yesterday. Paulo tried to sell her nephew a car last year, forged the title transfer. The nephew found out before he paid. He's done this before. Multiple times, apparently. But no one pressed charges. They were embarrassed or scared or just wanted it to go away. Not me. No, not you." That afternoon, I received a call from the real estate broker, Ricardo. "Donna Helena, I wanted to inform you that we've completed our internal investigation. Señor Cardoso submitted fraudulent documents to 3 other clients over the past 2 years. We missed the red flags. We're implementing new verification protocols." "That's good to hear. And we'd like to offer you a formal settlement for our role in this situation. Not an admission of wrongdoing, but an acknowledgement that we should have caught the forgery sooner." "I don't need your money," I said. "I need you to be more careful. The next woman might not have a blue folder." "Understood. And Donna Helena, thank you for standing firm. You probably saved others from the same thing." After he hung up, I walked through my house. The yellow kitchen, the living room where my mother watched her novellas, the bedroom where I've slept for 40 years. Everything exactly as it should be. Mine. Later that evening, Miriam came over with groceries and stayed for dinner. We didn't talk about Paulo. We talked about her daughter's wedding, about the new cafe that opened on the corner, about whether we should plant tomatoes next spring. Normal things. Safe things. As she was leaving, she stopped at the door. "I signed the divorce papers today, final ones. How do you feel?" "Light." She smiled, a real smile this time. "Like I've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down." "That's good." She hugged me. "Thank you for not letting me stay quiet." "You were never quiet. You just needed someone to hear you." After she left, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and opened the blue folder one last time. Every document was there, every receipt, every proof, every signature that said, I was here. I mattered. I remembered. I added one final paper, the court notification of Paulo's arrest. Then I closed the folder and put it back in the cabinet. He lost the house he never owned, and the woman who once believed him. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. I arrived at 9 a.m. for the final hearing, the moment when Paulo would either accept the plea agreement or face a full trial. His lawyer had recommended the plea: reduced sentence, probation, community service, and a permanent fraud conviction on his record. I sat in the gallery with Miriam. Lydia came too, though she wasn't required to testify. Moral support, she said. When Paulo was led in, he looked smaller somehow. Thinner. His suit hung loose, his shoulders curved inward. He didn't look at us. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and reading glasses, reviewed the case summary. Senor Cardoso, you've been charged with forgery, fraud, and attempted theft. The prosecution has offered a plea agreement. Do you understand the terms? Yes, Your Honor. And you accept? His lawyer leaned close and whispered something. Paulo nodded. Yes. Very well. You'll serve 6 months in the municipal facility, followed by 2 years probation. You'll make full financial restitution to Dona Helena dos Santos for all legal costs incurred. Your notarial access is permanently revoked. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Then this court accepts your plea. Sentencing will commence immediately. It was over in 15 minutes. No drama, no shouting, just paperwork and consequences. As we left the courthouse, Miriam touched my arm. Do you feel better? I feel finished. That's not the same as better. No, but it's what I need right now. That afternoon, I went to the bank and closed the safety deposit box. I took the blue folder home and filed the final court documents in chronological order. Then I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to Paulo, not to a judge or a lawyer or anyone official, to my mother. Mama, I kept the house. Someone tried to take it, but I kept the receipts like you taught me. I remembered everything. The dates, the names, the promises. You always said, Helena, simple doesn't mean stupid. I finally understand what you meant. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not scared. I'm just here in your yellow kitchen, drinking coffee from your favorite cup. The roses are blooming. I think of you every morning when I water them. I kept the house. Helena. I folded the letter and placed it between the pages of her handwritten will, then closed the folder and returned it to the cabinet. That evening, I made dinner. Rice, beans, chicken, the way my mother used to make it. I set the table for one, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. After washing the dishes, I stood at the kitchen window and watched the sun set over the neighborhood I'd lived in for 65 years, everything in its place, everything as it should be. My peace cost signatures, not screams. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning, I was making bread. The kitchen smelled like yeast and warmth, the way it used to when my mother was alive. I kneaded the dough with flour-dusted hands, pressing and folding in the rhythm she taught me when I was 10 years old. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the door. Through the window, I saw Miriam standing on the porch with a small potted plant and red eyes. I opened the door. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She held out the plant, a small rose bush with tight pink buds. I just wanted to bring you this. Why are you crying? Because I drove past the old apartment, where Paulo and I used to live. There's a new family there now, a woman with 2 little girls, and I realized I don't miss it, any of it. I took the plant and set it on the porch railing. Then I hugged my sister. You're free, I said. We both are. She stayed for coffee and watched me shape the bread dough into rolls. We talked about small things, her new job, my garden, whether we should take a trip somewhere next year. Normal things, sister things. When she left, I returned to the bread. While it rose, I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the blue folder. I opened it to the first page, my mother's will, written in her careful handwriting. Then I flipped to the last page, the court order marking Paulo's conviction as final. Between those 2 documents was the story of how I kept what was mine. I took a label from the drawer and wrote on it in clear, precise letters, "Proof of life." I placed it on the front of the folder and returned it to the cabinet, spine out, visible. Not hidden, not forgotten. Just there, in case I ever need to remember. Later that afternoon, the bread came out of the oven golden and perfect. I wrapped 2 rolls in a kitchen towel and walked across the street to Donna Rosa's house. She opened the door and smiled. "Helena, you didn't have to." "I wanted to. You've been a good neighbor." She took the bread and held my hand. "I heard what happened. With Paolo. I'm glad you fought." "Me too. You know what I've learned in 78 years?" She squeezed my hand. "The women who keep receipts are the ones who keep their dignity." I walked back home through the late afternoon light, past the roses blooming in my front garden, through the gate that clicked shut behind me. Inside, I washed the flour from my hands and poured myself a cup of coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd organized every document, written every timeline, prepared every proof. The house was quiet, not lonely, just mine. I took a sip of coffee and looked out the window at the street where I'd lived my whole life. The door had stayed closed that morning when strangers knocked, but the truth had walked in anyway, and I was still here. At 65 years old, in my mother's yellow kitchen, with a blue folder full of receipts and a future that belonged to no one but me. "At my age," I said to the empty room, "I don't scream, I document." And the house, warm with bread and memory, didn't answer. It didn't need to. If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.